My name is Marc-Andre Ferguson. I'm the editing and effects evangelist for Smoke. Today we're going to talk about workflows. I mean, if you saw Brian Mulligan's demo, if you saw Ken LaRue's demo, we've been showing how Smoke can be the be-all and end-all of your pipeline. But it can also fit somewhere in your pipeline, depending on what your workflow is. So Jan Shvalb from Lertavu, who also teaches Final Cut Pro 10 and Smoke and all sorts of cool stuff at different training providers such as FMC, will show you and demonstrate how he likes to work with Smoke coming from Final Cut Pro 10. So how many of you edit with Final Cut Pro 10? How many of you work with Final Cut Classic? Avid editors in here? All right, so we got a nice mix of editors. So Final Cut has evolved a lot in the last 2 years, and we've been working closely with Apple to make sure that everything that you do, both in Classic and especially in Final Cut Pro 10, you can, through the magic of XML, you can bring right into Smoke to complement your workflow. So Jan, tell me a little bit about what we're going to see.
Thanks, Mark. I'm really excited to talk about my workflow here. Basically, a couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to start a company with people I really like. And we can do the kind of work that was never possible before because of Final Cut 10 and Smoke and what it affords us to do in our production and post-production. And actually pre-production as well, so I want to talk about that. But first, let me show you the film that we're going to look at that we'll put together. Our company does events and short films for individuals mostly, not just corporations and commercial work. And this is one such film.
We'll leave audio on this. Thank you.
I wish I knew you way back when, before you were part of my plans. I think that we would have been friends. There's only time to live our lives. You'll be the one who's by my side, and I can promise you then you'll always be my best friend. Till the end when we part, I will give you my heart, and I promise to love you with all that it is, and I'll promise to be there whenever you need me, because you'll always be my best friend. You'll always be my best friend. Always be my best friend. You'll always be my best friend. Always be my best friend. You'll always be my best friend.
I like this piece because this is not the kind of stuff that we usually show in the Autodesk booth, right? This is a beautiful little piece. It's got some very subtle effects, and you've got a really quick turnaround on these things, don't you?
Absolutely. Our clients are individual. We can't charge them what we normally charge a commercial client. We can't book them or bill them by the hour. We have to have a fixed price, and if we can't deliver in a time that makes us profitable, then we can't do this kind of work. And what we can do with both Final Cut and Smoke is very unique because we start the process in Final Cut for pre-production. Right here we have a cut scene, but I'm going to quickly put together a new product here. So we'll do a new compound clip. And compound clips, by the way, if you work with Final Cut 10, are the best ways to edit. It's like having sequences. You could duplicate them for versioning. You don't have to create another database. They're really cool. So I'm going to do a pre-comp here. And this empty sequence, what we do is before we even shoot a single shot, we actually put the entire cut together in Final Cut. And this is something new in 10 that we really don't have access to with other tools. I mean, certainly we can do an automatic, we could spend the time, but we don't have the luxury of it at that time. Here, we start with a simple generator. We can...
Beach ball.
That happens.
That happens?
Well, you know, I always say, if you want a car that doesn't crash, you keep it in your garage. So, I mean, even the fanciest sports car will have that problem. So here we go. So I will click on my generators, and in here, there's a whole bunch of really great tools. One of them just happens to be a placeholder. So the first thing we usually do is we start with a placeholder. We find the resolution we want, and we attach the audio that we're going to use. This is a music video, after all. And we'll make this as long as we need to do it. I can watch this, right? Go to the beginning, and just time it for cuts. And just put all our cuts in there wherever they need to be. So we get a good idea of what this thing's going to look like. I'm not going to put all the cuts down in there, just work quickly through this. But these placeholders are really unique because if you take a look at what's going on inside this placeholder, is it has all the controls for you to change the framing of your shot. If you want a medium shot, you want one person in there, you can make sure you're on the right particular clip. You can specify if it's a man or a woman, the location of your shot, sunny day, cloudy day, interior, add notes. You can quickly animate it and get the camera move that you're looking for.
Right.
And when you're out on set, you have your iPad, you could view it, you could show the talent exactly what they need to do. And when you're back and you find your shot, I'm just going to randomly pick any shot here that I might want to use, set the in and outs, and I can just drop it in here and replace the shot, and I'm good to go. And my cut is pretty much done. So this type of workflow is very unique because it affords us to spend a tremendous time creating the story that we want and very little time wasting takes that we don't need. We don't want to put our subjects on the spot having to do take after take, especially since they're not professional actors. And it gives us the ability to shoot very quickly. This entire piece we shot in one day. So we could get to multiple locations, shoot quickly, and the cut was done in about, I don't know, a couple of hours maybe. It was just really quickly put together.
And all through this wonderful little storyboarding tool that's in Final Cut 10.
Absolutely. This changes everything for us. So we put together a rough. We tweak it a little bit, and then we take it into Smoke. Now, the reason we need to go into Smoke is because we enhance our stories with visual effects. We don't like to just put fancy filters and things like that to bring attention to the fact that it's a fancy filter. We like to tell a story through an effect. As you've seen some of the shots there, they're just really simple composites, but they make you think about what's going on, and that's what we love to do, and that's what Smoke gives us. So Final Cut, very powerful. You can do tremendous editing in here. You could find footage very quickly just by skimming through it. You don't have to click and load a clip in a source view monitor. To cut things in here, you can very quickly just select what you want, hit Option, close bracket, or open bracket to trim it in the timeline. So you can put together a really quick sequence. There are lots of great tools in here. The metadata for finding things, organizing things is tremendous. You don't have to create folders to organize stuff. Right here I have a pre-comp that I call this sequence. I could very quickly just select on my event and add a new smart collection. The smart collection is intelligent enough to filter things out based on a variety of criteria, including clip type, which I could just choose as my compound clip. And here, instead of my footage, I have all of my sequences.
Right.
So if I need to make versions, I can go ahead and duplicate this as many times as possible, and they just show up there.
And Final Cut 10 has the power of what they had in Final Cut Server. I mean, all the metadata tools in Final Cut Pro 10 are really powerful.
Oh, yeah, it's...
And instead of building dozens of bins and classifying everything, you can actually have Final Cut work for you and make these intelligent bins.
Absolutely.
So you can slap together a timeline really, really quickly.
Yeah, if you take a look at the metadata that's available to you, it's unprecedented. There's just so much stuff there. It's incredible. So using metadata is one of those things that just takes productivity to the next level.
Cool.
It definitely sets it aside from every other NLE. So let's take a look at what we do to actually get this into Smoke and how we do some of the really cool finishing stuff. It's as simple as selecting the sequence you want, going into File, and choosing Export XML. The XML that comes out of Final Cut is extremely robust, and Smoke is able to pick up on all the little things. I mean, everything you do in your timeline pretty much comes across. It's probably the most robust way to get stuff into Smoke. Let me get out of Final Cut and launch Smoke. And we'll take a look at that XML we just exported.
Right, so you can export Smoke, you can export XML from Final Cut Pro 10, you can export an XML from Final Cut Classic, AEFs from Avid. So we're really trying to be able to let anybody import a project from any other NLE and then use Smoke's powerful visual effects tools and compositing tools to continue working on their timeline.
Absolutely. It's so fluid. It's so easy. For importing, you don't have to do anything special. You just go to the Media Hub, where all your media lives. find the file that you exported, which I happen to have right here, and just like media, you just drag and drop it into your media library, and you can see quickly it just brings all of the stuff over. You get your sequence.
It went
you get
too
all your
quickly.
media.
It took about 2 seconds. So
I
it
know,
looks
it's
for all
just
of your
crazy.
media, reconnects your media, rebuilds your timeline. It's that simple.
Yeah, it's all there.
There's no transcoding. Yeah. It's you know, ProRes footage, all of your camera sources.
It's all really native.
There.
What I love about 2013 is it natively works with ProRes, so I don't really have to think about having to optimize or anything. I just continue to work the way
You can even render as ProRes now, which is awesome.
Yep, so here's our sequence, exactly like we saw it inside of Final Cut. I'm going to put together a few of these really cool shots. I love the fact that you can do compositing in the timeline, but the fact that you can take it further and take it into ConnectFX or even deeper, go into action is truly remarkable.
So tell me what you like about ConnectFX. ConnectFX is our node-based compositor, and you can access it directly from the timeline.
Well, here, let me show you. I'm going to select these two clips here in the end. This is one of the more complicated effects we have in the shot, and they're really simple, actually. And I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to click on Go to Effects and choose Create ConnectFX, and it's going to build the entire comp for me with these layers. Now, this is promoting everything into a very deep action, which is a 3D node-based compositor, which I don't need. I'm just going to use ConnectFX for the entire thing.
So if you've started any work in a timeline, it actually gets promoted into ConnectFX, and you continue working from there. So if you did some repositioning, you did some basic color correction, in this case you had some time warps because you changed the speed of the clips, so you don't have to start over once you promote your clip into ConnectFX.
That's correct. So what I have here is just the two clips, and ConnectFX is a node-based compositor. It's as easy as speaking a human language. You know, if you want to take an object and put it over another object, you define it as, here's object A, here's object B. I'm going to connect it somehow. I'm going to add another object and put it over that object. So there are a whole bunch of really cool nodes that exist inside of ConnectFX. And you could sort through the list. You have some categories you can look at. If you just want to blend and comp something, for example, you hit the B key, and it shows you where all those tools are. You could drag that in there. And everything is nicely color-coded. You have red, blue, and green inputs, and you have some outputs as well. The CFX nodes, what's actually going to go back to your timeline. This is the one track you're going to see in your timeline. So I know I'm going to take the result of my blend and comp, and I'm going to output it to the timeline.
It's just a matter of connecting the dots.
Yep, you can just drag it. You have some really cool things. So for example, if you're not sure what you're doing with something, you can use a keyboard shortcut, and you could toggle all the different inputs, and it tells you what they are. So I know there's my background. I want to connect it to this clip right here. That's great. This is going to be my foreground. Actually, I'm going to need a little bit more than just putting it over. I need to create a mask, so I need to create another node here. So I'm going to hit on Gmask and drop that in there. And I'm going to use the foreground to be both my foreground and the source for creating my Gmask. And the Gmask is going to go into one of the blue nodes. That's the background.
Right.
So I have basically this layer with a mask that I'm going to create over this layer. That's going to be my blend and comp. Now, when I look at it, obviously, that's not quite what I have going on here, because it's just blending right now. I need to actually create this mask. What's great about a node-based workflow is you can work in context. You could look at one thing and work with something else and have all your controls on screen. So I'm just going to select this clip, hold the minus key down, and click on it to put it into context. You can see that C1 there. Then I can select this window and switch it to my context 1 view.
So basically, any other node that you select in your entire schematic, you're actually going to see the end result of all of this in the right window.
Exactly.
You can have as many viewers as like this as you want. So if you want 2 different windows or 3 different windows, it's actually really cool for working with mask after doing color correction, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, because you always get to see this node, but you see the controls for whatever node you click on. So if I double-click on my Gmask, I can work in my Gmask and still look at that result, and I have all my controls here. It's a very efficient, great workflow. So I'm going to click on Draw Shape and quickly create a shape to mask that object out. And there we go. Let me just zoom out a little bit. So there we have it. It's a quick little shape. Now the problem is we shot this during different times of day. Obviously the sun changes, clouds come out, and now we need to do a very complicated color grade. So this is another thing that I love about Smoke. To do this match, you simply select the plate you want to color correct, go back into your nodes, and find a color corrector you want to use. I'm going to use C for all my different color corrections. And working in a node-based workflow with color corrector, you can put as many color correctors as you want. You can use really cool things like, I love this color curves thing. It's one of the greatest thing I've ever seen because it's one of the few applications in which you can select the color and not worry about the luminance influencing the color that you're selecting. It just selects it purely, so you get an awesome mask there. Here, I'm just going to use something simple like the color warper. I'm going to drag that right between my nodes.
And automatically connects.
Yep, automatically connects. Double click on it. I have the controls. I'm going to use the match tool here, so I'm going to use select. I'm going to control shift and drag a box around the area I want to change. Click on the same button. Notice there's a little blue icon there saying I already utilized it. And do the same thing for the area I want to use to match the source from, and my correction is done. It's really fast.
It's really fast. And then you can finesse it to death. I mean,
Absolutely.
you can have as many masks as you want.
I could turn auto key on, move in time, do it
Exactly.
again and again, so I can match the change of the shift of time as it goes through time. It's just remarkable. It's a really fast, fluid workflow. I get to finish, get all my effects, and I'm done. And the beautiful thing about this entire workflow is I don't actually have to leave the application to make changes. I don't have to manage multiple project files. I don't have to, do the whole dynamic thing or swap whatever project files I need, render, replace, whatever it's called. There's lots of names for it. The best thing to do is avoid all the names and just keep it native in one application where you can get it all done. So let's look at a few other things here. I'm going to leave ConnectFX, and you'll see everything has been intelligently collapsed to just that one layer. I don't need two layers in here anymore, and I could continue on this way. So setting it up in Final Cut, where I just put all my sources in one place, made it really easy for me to do it here.
And it's really easy to iterate in the sense that if you need to do any kind of changes, all you have to do is double-click on it.
Yep.
It's no more round-tripping to another application, no more rendering and wrangling render files. Nobody likes to do that. So it's all in the timeline.
Yep. Let's do another one. I'm going to go to the very first one here where I have this book that we're looking at, and we're going to track the shot to put the image inside of it. So in this case, I'm going to build everything up by just dragging some sources in here. Let me zoom in a little bit, select on our clip, and I'm going to promote that to ConnectFX as well.
So you can start in ConnectFX with just one shot. Basically, you got a clean slate, and you can say, I want to build my composite from nothing.
Exactly. And since I'm going to do some 3D work here, I'm going to take my graphic and in 3D corner pin and position it on top of that book. I need to jump into Action. Action has got to be the coolest node ever because as a single node, it probably has more juice than most the full-featured applications that I know.
It's like the rabbit hole.
It is. It just goes so deep, and it's remarkable. So once I load Action, again, it's just another node, but once you jump into it, you see just how deep the rabbit hole goes. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on there. Now, Action is its own compositor, and it has its own schematic, so you need to jump into that in order to see what's going on. And you'll see that there's one node to start with in Action, and that's the default camera. And that's because Action is always 3D. It's not part-time 3D. It's not 2.5D. It's 3D all the time, which is really cool. So I'm going to go to the end here. I'm also going to find the graphic that I have right here that I'm going to comp in there. And you can see just bringing media into Action, into ConnectFX is as easy as just dragging and dropping it. You don't have to worry about importing it, stepping back out, finding a way to connect it. It's just very elegant.
Who's ever been in an edit session and then you jump to another application and then you realize you forgot one source? You have to go back to Final Cut and then export the source again and import it into the other application. Now you've got access to all of your media.
Yep. So I'm going to double click on the shot right here. And I want to talk a little bit about what we're actually seeing here. The axis node is great. That's how you position stuff. You've seen some of the cool stuff everybody else does with it. You can build really awesome arrays of interaction between access nodes. The access node can be tracked on its own, but everything that's attached here, this little image card, it's not just a flat card. Right now, by default, the surface properties of it are flat. That doesn't mean it's flat. It's actually still 3D. You can move this object around in 3D space and all that stuff, which is great. But you can change its properties. If you click on flat, you'll see there's a few options here, bilinear, bicubic, and extended bicubic. And bilinear will basically allow me to corner pin it in 3D. Bicubic will allow me to not just corner pin it, allow me to have busy handles on those corners and move them around. And extended bicubic, which is really cool. If you jump in there, you can actually subdivide this bad boy and just select a whole bunch of points and move them in 3D space.
You can bend and warp surfaces. You can wrap them around
We're
objects.
always working in 3D. So if I go into orbit here, you can see I'm actually working with all of this stuff in 3D. All these points can be moved and pulled, and it's really not a 2D shape anymore. It's exceptional. I'm going to select my camera and just very quickly reset it. And let's go back to our shape, and I'm going to make this a bilinear because we're going to corner pin it. Now you can see with the bilinear we have 4 corners, so I'm just going to drag a box around the 4 corners to select them. I'm going to go to my vertices and click on my stabilizer to go into my tracker node. And this is one of the 2 trackers that you'll find in action when you see it. One was on the left side, one's on the right side. The one that's on the right side, that goes much deeper the rabbit hole. It allows you to select vertices, not just of a card like this, but if you're drawing masks, you can select the individual points in the masks and track them. It's just crazy.
It works just like you did. You selected the 4 corners, and it automatically added 4 points to the tracker. So let's say you've got a really elaborate mask and about 22 points, and what you want to do is track somebody, move around the frame. It will create 22 tracker markers and automatically track all of those points.
So I'm going to move these points into place and size them up just a little bit. I'm going to also make sure that this thing changes in perspective. There's lots of motion blur going on, so I'm going to make sure they're not fixed. And when you're working with trackers, just like everything else in this application, it makes sense. We talked about, a node being kind of like a sentence, this node over this node. Well, with trackers, it's the same thing. If you're reading in English, just like you're writing the nodes in English, you're going from left to right, top to bottom. So you're going to lay these out in the same pattern. So basically left to right, top to bottom, and it makes perfect sense. So you don't have to have any guesswork over where the tracker should go. I'm going to position these very quick. I'm going to make them just enough of a size. There's 3 components to every tracker that we look at. You have the little center piece, right? The little point that you see in the center. That's where you're going to attach the center of whatever it is you're tracking. In our case, the vertice will match up where that point is. That's a little offset. The inner area is the area that we're trying to track, and in this case, it's these little black markers that we have here. And the outer area is the area that it's going to search for it. So depending on how much motion you have from one frame to the next, you can make the boxes bigger or less. And it's fairly self-intuitive. It's great. So I'm going to gang these all together. I'm going to track this backwards because we're starting at the last frame where my trackers are the biggest, and I'm going to analyze backwards.
Simple track, quickly.
I almost regret that. I wish it broke so I could show you some cool stuff you could do, like fix it here, manual track it. And that's, well, I'll let Ken do that. And let me get back. I'm going to hit return. And I'm back in here, and you can see everything is baked into this lovely node. Now, there's great ways of actually making adjustments in here. I can go to a 3 layout view here, right? I could switch one of these views to my what am I looking for here? My action.
Your orbit view?
My front view. My action front view.
In source.
So I can actually manipulate. That's the wrong view. Did I have it right?
You want the 3D view or the
my
inputs?
media front? That's what I'm talking about. Media
right.
front. There's so many views. Sometimes you get lost when you look at the drop down. I just usually use keyboard shortcuts. And the beauty of the media front view is when I try to work interactively in here, and I could actually step back here and even look in one of these other views into my final view, my result view for CFX, even though I'm not in CFX. And I can work with my offsets on my vertices here. So I click on Edit Offsets. You could see in my Action Front view, and let me just make a little more real estate. I'm going to hide my sources. As I move these points, I can see exactly how they render in my final result. So I don't have to back out of Action to see this stuff. I'm just going to quickly manipulate these little offsets. And I have even the ability to offset them using numerical entry, should I need that. I'm going to just do this very quick. And then we can exit the application.
Exit ConnectFX, and then
it feels like an application, doesn't it? It's so rich. I said exit the application.
It's like having several applications, but in the same app. It's like you're jumping into full-fledged, the full-fledged editor, and then the full-fledged 3D compositor,
Yep.
and then the full-fledged node-based compositor. And everything is back in a timeline. So if you guys are traditional editors and you're coming at Smoke from an editorial background, what we wanted to do with 2013 is to make sure that you had access to your effects tools in the most logical way for traditional editors. So right from the timeline, you just right-click on a segment, you have access to all these effects. And all of this based on a timeline. It was edited in Final Cut Pro 10 because of its wonderful editing capabilities, exported, imported into Smoke through XML, and then go from there.
Exactly. And it's so easy to go back and forth. I mean, I just realized I forgot motion blur. Guess what? Double click, go back into your view. That's the wrong tool I went into. As you can see, there's a resize on here as well. We can enter that. And as I go back into action, I can choose my node prefs, and I could enable things for rendering like motion blur and give it some anti-aliasing so it looks cleaner. We can even preview right from here to see what it's going to look like before
And
I even exit.
it really does go deeper and deeper and deeper. I like to say
absolutely.
that Smoke now is like an onion. So you can add one layer of effects, and then you want to take it further. So you go into another submenu and add stuff like motion blur, stuff like anti-aliasing. And then you can learn all of these things one after the other, thanks to the massive amount of training that we have now in Smoke 2013, such as Ripple training, the Smoke Learning channel, the Smoke Learning blog, smoketraining.com, your classes. So really get into it, download the 30-day trial, look at all the training that's available, and then head on over to the area forum, ask questions, and people like Jan, people like me, people like Ken and Grant, we all answer these questions because we want you guys to be proficient in Smoke 2013. Thank you very much, Jan, for giving us a little workflow demonstration, and I hope to see you guys on the area. Thank you.